This is my project today. It's a Craftsman leaf blower that I got from a friend of mine who said it doesn't work anymore. So he gave it to me to just kind of tinker with it, see if I can get it going. It's got a 24cc two-stroke engine, and the first thing I'm going to do is see if it has gas. I don't see any on this little sight glass thing here, but I'm going to take off the cap and tilt it over this drain pan just to make sure. All right, let's see what this does. Gonna get some oil on the side, but no big deal. I'll just clean that off in a second. I don't expect anything to come out of here. Okay, I was wrong about that. Something did come out. This is the intake with like a little filter thing, and this is the fuel line, and it's completely broken. So that's probably the problem right there. It probably just wasn't getting any gas. So let's see if I can tear into this thing and figure out what I'm gonna do about it. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start just taking these little panels off and seeing what's underneath it. I mean, I know under here is gonna be the carb and the throttle, but I'm gonna use a hex key, also known as an Allen wrench, to pull these out and see where I go from there. I see more around here that hold the whole casing together. Here's what was behind that panel. Here's the air filter, and it's just this little foam thing right here, and it's actually pretty clean. And then there's the carburetor right there. Now I've turned it around and I've got this little protective cover over the muffler, and I see some more Allen bolts there, and then there are holes all around the casing here that hold the two halves together. So I guess that's the next step. All right, got those two screws out, and this should just pop off. Yep, there we go. There's the muffler. Because of the shape of the casing and the location of this bolt right here that holds the two halves of it together, I had to take off the muffler, which was just these two little bolts here that go into the engine block. So now hopefully I can get the thing separated. Now that I've got the Allen bolts out, all that's holding it together, I think, is this wing nut and this metal band that tighten around, oh, hello, there it goes, that tighten around the actual blower duct, which is over there. So let's see if it separates. I've started to separate the casing and taken the handle out. You can see the top of the engine block and the fuel tank there. Something I forgot about was this little hinged cover down here for the actual impeller, the thing the engine turns to blow air out. So I'm going to need to open it up, and I see these springs here, so I'm going to have to get those out of the way, pull this thing off, and then kind of wrestle the springs back in place when I'm putting this thing back together. I've got the casing open, and you can see how simple it is. Fuel tank, here's the engine, here's the impeller, and here is the ratchet mechanism that we use to actually start the engine spinning to get it started. Those two holes on the top of the fuel tank are for the fuel lines, and there they are. So yeah, it definitely needs new fuel lines. You can see in the fuel tank here that there's that sludge at the bottom. That's what happens to gasoline when it sits. And here's some more of that sludge on this little clip for the fuel tank. Oh, it smells really stale too. Woo! So I'm gonna get some brake cleaner and clean that out. Now I have to get to the other end of the fuel lines, and to do it, whoa, or not. Wow. Let's see how, oh, wow, that's how degraded these lines were. Yep, time for some new ones. Well, I'm still gonna pull the carburetor off anyway. I mean, it's just these two bolts, and I think this whole thing will come out with it. I'm gonna need to pull it out anyway just to kind of clean it out a little bit, because I know with all that crap in the bottom of the fuel tank, there's gotta be some in the carb as well. There's the carburetor and the remains of a fuel line. And then these are the wires for the kill switch. When you press this, it grounds the electricity going to the spark plug so that the engine stops running. And it's just two little connectors right here. So that'll be really easy to take out. And then I can just put this to the side. Okay, got the carburetor off. Here's the primer bulb that pushes a little extra fuel in there to start it when it's cold. This is the adjustment screw to adjust how much fuel gets mixed into the air. And then this little plate here is the throttle butterfly to let more air in to let the engine run faster, or less air in to get the engine to run slower. And then here are the fuel line connections. So here, I guess I'm just gonna clean it up and see what happens. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spray brake cleaner into these little tubes right here. Those are the fuel connections. I just went to Lowe's and got this kit. So it's got a filter with some fuel line and a couple of things, like a little snake tool for pulling line through, connector, primer bulb. I don't think I'm going to need this. In fact, actually, I know I'm not going to need it because it's a different design of bulb. But the main thing is the line and the filter. So this is going to be the fuel return line, and this is going to be the fuel intake line. So I need to route these through those holes in the tank and up to the carburetor, and hopefully that'll take care of it. While I've got this apart, it's a good opportunity to show you how the ratchet mechanism works for the pull starter. When you pull it, obviously it turns the flywheel to start the engine. When you let it go back in, those little fingers click onto that fitting there, and that's how the ratchet works. So when you let it back in, that's the clicking you hear. And then while the engine's actually running, the speed of the engine pushes these little fingers out using centrifugal force, and so they actually don't touch the plastic while it's running, so it doesn't wear it down. Very simple, but also very effective. I just put the fuel tank back in and pre-trimmed the fuel line to length, and then now I need to get some more line from the return port here that will then go back through this hole into the tank. The kit came with this fitting here, which is precisely the right size to fit into this hole. And once I get it in, all I have to do is route it from the outlet port on the carburetor to this fitting. Now I've got the return line fitted to the gas tank as well. So now I need to put it back in and pre-trim the length just like I did for the fuel line. And then I'll be ready to put the carburetor back on. Now that I've got the fuel line in and the return line routed, I put a piece of rubber band on the fuel line just to make sure I don't get the two mixed up. And now I've got the carb in place to get the approximate length I need. I'll mark it with my fingers and take my cutters and trim it right there. Got the fuel lines hooked up. Now I have to take these connectors and put them back onto the kill switch right here. And the choke plate is also in this, and I wanted to demonstrate how it works. When it's running, you can see that hole in the middle is wide open. Then there's half choke when it's kind of started to run but still warming up. And then there's full choke, which just has that little tiny hole to let in enough air for it to start, but also get the carburetor to pull in enough fuel to get the engine running in the first place. Now it's all ready to go back together. All I have to do is hold the carburetor in position here and it'll slip onto alignment pins. And then this will go on top of it. And then I've got bolts that go through that plate there with these brass fittings that go into those two holes on the side. And I'm gonna have to put my phone down to do this. I'll pick it back up as soon as I'm done. Now I've got everything back together. Something I realized as I was just about to put the other side of the casing on was the return line was not touching the crankcase, but it was a little too close for comfort. So I trimmed a little bit off, and that's it right there, just to shorten it up and give a little extra space between the crankcase and the line. And here is what it looks like. You've got your engine cylinder. Those are the cooling fins because it is an air-cooled engine. And then the starting mechanism I pointed out earlier, fuel tank, and then this is the impeller right here. that compresses the air and pushes it out through here. Here's the handle, and it just slips onto these pins. The reason it's not bolted directly to those pins is because giving it a little extra room to shake back and forth takes some of the vibration from the engine and isolates it from your hand, so it's a little more comfortable to use. I just remembered one more thing I want to show you before I put the engine back together fully. In a 4-cycle engine like you have in a car or bigger lawn equipment, it has valves that open and close, but on a 2-stroke, the piston also has its own valves built in, and I'm going to try to pull this. You can see those little grooves in the piston. Those actually serve as the valves that line up with ports for the exhaust and the intake. So that means that every time the piston goes down, it pushes out the exhaust and pulls in fresh air at the same time. So instead of having to go intake, compression, power, exhaust, those are the 4 strokes in a regular engine, when I say regular, I mean like bigger car engines. You only have 2 strokes. You've got the downstroke and the upstroke, because the downstroke pulls in new air and pushes out exhaust at the same time. So every time the piston goes down, it's creating power. So it's a very powerful engine for its size. That makes it lightweight, and that's always good in a handheld device. The downside of that is that because the oil is mixed in with the fuel, it burns its oil, and so it's really not good for the environment, we'll put it that way. One last thing I have to do before I put the other side of the casing on is I have to pre-tension the spring on this, and I'm going to do it with a pair of little vice grips. I'm going to hold it like that, and I'm going to have to put the phone down again because I'm going to have to hold this, position this, and then maneuver that other half of the casing on top of it. So I'll be right back. Okay, I finally got the 2 pieces back together. The spring here was what was really a pain because you have to hold it in position while lining up the pins to go into the 2 sides of the casing. And it would have taken me longer to bleep out all the swear words I said while putting it together. So we'll just say it was, it took a while. I just checked the spark plug. It looks all right, so I'm gonna go ahead and reconnect that. And there we go. Now I just need to put on the heat shield for the exhaust, for the muffler, and the air filter and the cover for it. And then it'll be time to fill it with gas and see if I have succeeded. All right, just put gas in it, so now's the moment of truth. I'm gonna put the choke on. Probably have to hit this a few times just to get some fuel up in the system. And all right. I have no idea if this is gonna work, so my fingers are crossed. Whoa. Well, there we go. Turns out I just flooded it by pushing this too many times.